Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk about why auto is not evil. So I'm Daniel Norton, I'm a photographer here in New York. I make videos like this about technique, about philosophy, sometimes about gear. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, go ahead and subscribe. So I was I was actually on a hike yesterday, and I thought of this phrase that my friend said to me years ago. He was a Photoshop instructor, and he was talking about the different modes, and he said, I always teach students, to do this stuff manually, because, and I say, in your mind, replace the word auto with evil. And we were just talking about that in general in photography. And he said, yeah, auto exposure, auto this, it's all, it's just not the right thing. And while I kind of agree that when you're learning photography, or one of the steps to learning photography, right, is that you should take control of your exposure triangle and, choose your white balance and do these things. I think that there's many automatic functions that we can use. First of all, even throwing it on fully auto is not necessarily a bad thing, depending on what you're doing. But there's, even when we want more refined stuff, there's certain automatic functions that are definitely worth using. And I find myself using more and more of them actually as time goes on. I guess because the camera technology is getting better, so it's just easier. So the first one, of course, that everybody probably uses is autofocus. I mean, autofocus is just something we've become so accustomed to. I do actually manually focus when I do certain things, like macro. If I'm doing some product photography, oftentimes I'll manually focus that, mostly because I set the focus and I don't want it to keep shifting, because if I want to do any kind of composites or whatever, which is sometimes something you do in product photography especially, you want to make sure your focus plane is the same. So I'll find a spot and I'll pre-focus on it. Oftentimes I'll use the autofocus to do that, and then I will turn it to manual focus, do any final tweaking, and leave it there. But autofocus is one of the, I guess that's the obvious one, right? But lately, what I've been using a lot, and especially in video, is auto white balance. So auto white balance is something that in stills I almost never use, and the reason for that is when I'm shooting, typically shooting tethered, right, into Capture One, as you guys know how I shoot. What I don't want is for my white balance to slightly change each image. I'd rather it be consistently, I'm shooting raw. I'd rather it consistently be warm or cool or whatever, and I can tweak them all later. Obviously, the best bet would be to do a custom white balance, but the idea is that they're all the same. That way I can batch process stuff. It's just easier if everything's the same. I often say it's better that they're all the same and a little bit wrong than that they're all right but completely different, because when you're turning in stuff to a client, they don't want to see their skin tone or their exposure shift per frame. They want to see it consistent, especially like a catalog or something like that. So auto white balance is something I almost never use. But in video, doing like videos like this, I found that it's super useful, and mostly because well, when I'm making a video like this, for instance, I mean, not this one because I'm only going to just sit here, but let's say I'm on a location and I'm filming throughout the day, and I want to film different aspects of things, right? If I'm not very careful and the light is changing, what will end up happening is there'll be noticeable shifts. Again, it's kind of like the deal with the catalog thing. There'll be noticeable shifts in the video. In fact, this happened to me. I set my white balance based on the daylight early on when I first got the DJI Osmo Pocket, and I filmed a bunch of stuff, and then not really thinking, I had turned off some lights and then kept filming, and then I realized when I went to put them together later, when I went to cut them together, the color didn't make sense. Because when you're doing non-linear video, right, I'm talking now, but 2 hours from now I might shoot some B-roll, the color may have changed, right? And if you're not sure if you don't do a custom white balance, then auto is a good way to make sure that stuff looks consistently the same. So I use auto white balance a lot for video now. It's interesting, I wouldn't have thought, I mean, that was one of the areas I really always put in manually, like I said, but auto white balance for video, I mean, I find that it's pretty much where I leave my camera set, and they do a good job. I think if I was doing more of like and I'm talking about video like vlogging and stuff, if I was doing a video like a movie, that'd be a whole different thing. You would do custom white balance because you want to be filtering and adding color for flavor and texture. Flavor and texture is like food. That's what color does, right? In this, I'm not tweaking my color to make it look a certain way. It's just a vlog, I'm just talking, right? So I just want neutral. I want it to look consistently the same, and I found auto white balance works great for that. So the other auto thing that I just started using with this kit right here, I'm using the Nikon Z50. This is like maybe the third video I've shot with it, which is pretty cool. And What I didn't realize, or I guess I realized once I started using it, I wasn't thinking. I threw everything on manual like I normally would do, except for the white balance. And I was filming, and the light kept changing. And again, you don't want that, right? But at the same time, I don't want my depth of field shifting, and you can't really change shutter speed really in video, or you really shouldn't. So I'm using auto ISO, and I feel like not 2 months ago I was making a video, or I was talking to somebody, and I said I never use auto ISO. I'm sure somebody will call me on that right now. It's true. I never really used it. I was like, I don't really like that because I like to know what my ISO is, because I don't want, it all over the place. And you know what? For this type of thing, for video where the light's shifting slightly, I would rather have the consistent exposure than have the consistent noise level, because, again, unless it's going to make a major shift, like all of a sudden it's dark, it's not going to shift that much that's going to make that much of a difference in this situation. So auto ISO, I'm finding is super useful. So there you go, something that I didn't think I would like and that I'm using a lot. I can tell you what doesn't work well for me, though, in video, is auto gain on the mics. The first time I started using the C50, I had it on auto gain. I wasn't thinking. And what ends up happening is as soon as you stop talking, the sound level goes up because it's trying to pick up the sound in the space. So auto gain, not a big fan of that. I think unless you're in a very quiet space, I don't even know when you would use it. I'm sure somebody out there that does audio a lot more in depth than I do will be able to tell me when auto gain would be good. I find that not to be the right way to do it. So I have all my gain set manually. I test all my sound first. I'd rather be a little bit softer, a little bit loud, but consistent than have this weird like shift coming up and down, because you can hear everything going on. Like, for instance, I don't know if you can hear it or not, but there's like a motorcycle that I can hear in my ears. I'm guessing based on my gain, you probably can't hear it, but if I stopped talking and that was an auto gain, you would hear it because it would come up to grab that noise. So auto gain, no. I'm also not a huge fan of just generally auto exposure unless it's just for a snapshot, but that's a whole other thing. But the other thing that I want to talk about that I use auto a lot, it's probably maybe not even thought of as auto for people, many people, because we just use it so much, is TTL, right? Through the lens metering. When you're using through the lens metering, even though your camera is set manually, you're controlling everything. You're controlling your ISO, you're controlling your f-stop, you're controlling your shutter speed. The flash is changing in power, and that is happening automatically. That's like the beauty of TTL. I always say, I describe it as a little photo assistant runs out every time and remeters, and that's basically what it is. You're letting the camera's meter decide. You're basically using an automatic exposure, in a sense, an automatic flash exposure. And I gotta say that, again, it's pretty darn good depending on the system you use. So like TTL is one of the automatic things that I use all the time. Like normally in my photography work, I'm not using auto ISO. I'm not using auto white balance for photography. But TTL, always. I use it constantly. I found it super reliable. I basically use it until it doesn't work, which as time goes on, this TTL stuff is just getting better and better, honestly. And I find that 99% of the time it's perfect. You do have to understand how it works, just like any auto setting. And basically what you need to do is consider how things change and then switch to manual when needed. And I know ProPhoto does this, and I guess more systems are starting to try to add this, where you can lock in the manual exposure after you get the TTL reading, which makes it even more useful. So yeah, I mean, TTL is probably the thing I use. And all that being said, I still use a light meter. For certain projects, it really depends on what I'm doing. So while auto stuff has come a long way, baby, it really is something that you have to still understand. Auto doesn't mean evil, but it also doesn't mean don't think, right? Just because auto generally works for you doesn't mean that you don't think about it. It's just like autofocus, you have to understand what makes autofocus work, what makes it better or worse, what situations it's going to be tricked. Same thing is true for auto exposure, any kind of auto exposure, whether it be ISO or whatever. So just think about this. Don't turn off your brain when you put the camera on auto. You still have to understand how the camera operates in order to get the best possible images. And you will. If you have a camera that does an automatic exposure and you know how to kind of manipulate light, or use it to your advantage, you can get really excellent images using the automatic functions. So yeah, don't shy away from it and feel like that, oh, you can't use auto because it's evil, or you should never do it. That being said, I almost never hit auto like on levels and stuff in Photoshop still. I mean, I just don't, because again, it never does what I really want to do. What I used to do actually early on in Photoshop is I would hit the auto just to see what it would do, and then I would reset it and then move on, and just to kind of see what it thought was right. I almost never do that. I don't know if anybody uses auto anything. Let me know, guys, if you use auto in Photoshop or any editing software. because I really don't in that sense. But on the camera, man, TTL, so that's automatic flash exposure. I'm using auto white balance a lot for video and also auto ISO for video. I've not used the auto ISO so much for stills or at all for stills, and I don't know that I ever would, just because of the way that I operate and the way I think. And also because generally speaking, I shoot stuff really contrasty, and auto exposure doesn't usually work for me unless it's flat, and like right now. So anyways, guys, let me know what you guys do as far as auto, or do you think, oh no, auto, or if you use auto all the time and you're just like, yeah, why wouldn't I use it? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any other questions, guys, let me know, and I will see you tomorrow.